Hello friends, welcome to my channel, and in today's video we will take a look on the HTTP service. So we have different HTTP service that we write to make a request from the UI. That is, we have get request, we have post request, we have put request, we have delete request. So we will see how we can write get request in this video. So without getting late, let's get started. We will follow a couple of steps to make this HTTP GET request. But before following these steps, in order to make your learning more feasible, I have created a fake API which will have a list of employee, and by hitting this localhost 3000/employee list, we can get this JSON data. Okay, if you want to know how we can create the fake JSON API, you can check in the description. I will put the link of the video. I have made a separate video on this, so you can take a look how we can create the fake get, post, delete and put API. Okay, so let's proceed further. So I've created this API. So what by hitting this URL, we can get the JSON data in the form of list of employee. Okay, now let's try to make a request to this API and get the data into our UI. Okay, now the first step that we need to do is to add the HTTP client module dependency in order to write the HTTP services. Okay, so let's go to our VS Code. In app module.ts, let's import HTTP client module from Angular common / HTTP. Okay, so we need to first import this dependency, and let's also add this into the import array here. So now we have added dependency in order to write the HTTP services. Now let's create one employee service inside this employee component. Okay, so let's create it. Type ng, g for generate, s for service, name of service, and before that give the location. So we are creating the service inside the employee component, so give employee / and then name of the service. We will name the service as employee only. Okay, so it will take a couple of seconds to create the service inside the employee component. Okay, so now you can see, if I open this employee component, we have this employee service here, right? Now the first thing that we will do is to import the HTTP client class here. Okay, import HTTP client. Okay, and if you see this HTTP client class, this will provide us all the CRUD operations: get, put, post, delete. So what we will do, we will create a object of this HTTP client and inject it into our constructor, so that we can call the get, put, post, delete any CRUD method. Okay, so let's do that. Let's create object of HTTP client. Let's name the object as HTTP, and this will be type of HTTP client. So we have created one object here and injected it into the constructor. Okay, if I control click on HTTP client, inside this you can see it has handler. Okay, if I scroll down, you can see it has this get method, right? If I search for post, it will have post method also. So if you see, I scroll down, it has post method. Similarly, it will have put and delete also. Okay, so this HTTP client has these CRUD methods which we can call in order to perform our HTTP requests. Okay, so here we will write one method. Let's name it as get employee list, right? Because we are getting the employee, right? So let's name it as get employee list. Okay, now this method, let's put a observable here. If you don't know what is observable and detail about observable, you can check the link in the description. I have made a separate video on observable, so you can take a look on that. So make this method as observable. Observable comes from rxjx library. Now observable of, for now we will put a type as any. Okay, observable of any. Now inside this method, let's return, call the get method of HTTP client class. Okay, so how we can do that? We can call this dot the object which is HTTP and then call the method. So you can see we have different HTTP service methods. We have delete, get, put, post, right? Here we will call get. Okay, now get of, give the same type that we have given here, get of any, and inside this we will put the URL from which we will get the data. Okay, so as I have shown you earlier, we are hitting this URL to get the data, so we need to put this URL into the get method. Okay, so copy this, go to your VS Code. Now what we will do, we will create one variable, let's say const URL. Okay, and let's put the whole URL here, right? So after hitting this URL only we will get the employee list data, right? Now let's add this URL to this get method. Okay, so this is how you can write a get request into the service. Now we have written the service to get the employee list, right? Now in order to render it on the UI, we need to subscribe to this method of this service, employee service, in order to get the data from the observable. So what we will do, follow the steps as I say. Go to your employee.component.ts. First of all, we will inject the service into this component. Okay, so similar way, let's add private and let's name as employee service. This is the object and the name of class as employee service, right? So we have created a object of this employee service class and we have injected it into the constructor. Make sure you import this employee service here. Okay, now that you have injected the employee service, we can write one more method here, get employee data. Okay, inside this method what we can do, we can write this dot, we can call the object employee service dot. So what we have done here, we are calling the method in the employee service which will give us the list of employee, right? So we will call this get employee list. Okay, and now in order to get data from this method we need to subscribe it, so add subscribe. Okay, Now inside the subscribe we will write arrow function. Let's name it as res and give an arrow. Okay, so now all the employee list data will come in this res variable. What we will do, we will create a employee list variable and let's give it type as any for now. Okay, and let's put this response into this employee list. So this dot employee list equals to res. Okay, because if you can see this res is accessible inside this block only. So what we have done, we have created one global variable and we have put all the data into this employee list variable. Right now, since when the component loads, first of all this constructor loads and then ngOnIt method loads, you need to call this get employee data method inside this ngOnIt. Okay, so let's call it get employee data, right? So now we have called it here. Now let's run our application. As our application runs, let's add one console log statement in order to see whether our data is getting printed or not. Okay, so let's console this employee list here. Okay, so now if I go on the UI, let's open localhost 4200. Let's open the console. So in the console, if you can see, our array has been printed. So we have got this list of employee data, right? If you can see here, right? So now what we will do, we will try to print this employee data into the HTML. Now since this employee data is an array, so what we will do, we will make a for loop in order to print the each employees. Okay, so let's name as employee list. Let's create one div. Now let's add one ng4 here. ng4 equals to let key of, so we are getting the data in this employee list, right? So let's copy this employee list and put it here. So let key of employee list, and then let's bind the properties here. So it will be first key dot id, then we have key dot name, key dot address, right? So now what we have done, we have looped through this employee list and printed the ID, name and address of each employee. So let's go into UI. Now you can see here, if you can see, ID, name and address is given here, right? So this is how you can write a get request to get the data from server and print it on UI. One more thing that we can do is, if we go to service, right, we have put here, if you can see, observable of any and get of type any. Okay, so what we can do, we can create one interface here inside this employee component. Let's name it as employee.ts. right? And let's export interface, let's name it as employee, and there are three properties, right? If I go to this list, you can see we have three properties in each employee object, right? ID, name and address. So let's create the corresponding properties here, which is ID of type number, then name of type string, address of type string, right? Now let's change the types everywhere. So in the service, let's give the type as employee, and here also employee, but this will be of type employee array, right? Because we are getting the list of employee, right? Also we need to import this employee interface here, so let's import it. Import employee, right? And in the employee.component.ts also, where you have put the employee list as any, you can write it as employee array, and you can initialize it with the empty array. Okay, so this is how you can write the get request and you can print it onto your UI. Now let me repeat the steps once again so that it will be more clear for you. First of all, we have gone to app.module.ts. Here we have imported HTTP client module. After that, we have created this employee service into this employee component. Okay, now in this employee service, we have created an object of HTTP client class, which is HTTP, and using this object we are calling the method of HTTP client class. So we can call all the CRUD methods. Here we are working with the get. So if you can see, we have written this get employee list of type observable of employee list, and then we have written this http.get, and then we have passed the URL. By hitting the URL, we are getting the employee list data. So we have written this service. Inside this service we have written this method which will fetch all the data for us. Okay, now what we have done, we have gone to HTTP. Now we have gone to employee component.ts. Here we have injected the service and we have written one get employee data service. Now we have written one method, get employee data method, and inside this method we have subscribed to the service method which is get employee list, and we have get all the data from this method. And then in the HTML we have written a for loop to loop through this employee list and print all the employees. One more thing that you can do for the performance enhancement of your project is, let's create one object, let's name it as subscription. Okay, this will be of type subscription, which will come from RxJS. So let's initialize it also as subscription. Okay, and now what we can do, we can write here, we can put all these data into this subscription object. So this dot subscription equals to whatever you have written here, right? Now what we can do, we can implement here OnDestroy method. and since we have implemented this interface, we need to write ng destroy method here. So let's write ng destroy. Inside this destroy we can write this dot subscription dot unsubscribe. Okay, so what I have done here, whenever you will come out of this component, the subscription will be unsubscribed, so that it won't render the previous component's data. Okay, so this will enhance the performance of your application. So this is the standard way you can add the subscription object here, okay, which will come from RxJAX library. If it is not imported, you can explicitly import it. If you can see here, this comes from RxJAX. Now into this subscription object, add the subscribe thing that you have done to get the employee data, right? And then you can implement the OnDestroy here on the top, you can see. And since you have implemented this OnDestroy, you need to write ng OnDestroy, and then you can unsubscribe this subscription. Okay, so that's all for this video. If you haven't subscribed my channel, please do subscribe my channel to get more updates. Thanks and have a nice day.